So I've been noticing a certain small trend in some of the comments that are appearing in my videos, especially videos where I'm talking about the 3D or how to ignore the 3D or how much the 3D doesn't matter. There is this small trend where at least one or two people will pop into the comments and say stuff like, well, what's the point of even manifesting at all if the 3D doesn't matter and if the 3D is not real and if your imagination is the only thing that's real, then why are we even manifesting at all? And so I want to address this pretty dangerous misinterpretation of what we mean when we say ignore the 3D or the 3D isn't real or the 3D doesn't matter. These comments are honestly kind of a dumb misinterpretation of what we're trying to say there. So in this video, I'm going to address how to actually be thinking about this because I don't want it to keep gaining more traction where people might see these comments that are like, well, if imagination's the only reality, then I guess manifesting doesn't even matter. I don't want anyone to see those comments and then believe that logic, and by the way, that logic is actually a form of ego backlash. That person who's writing the comment, they're having an ego backlash thing happen where their ego really wants to reject the true steps necessary in order to manifest. And so their ego is thinking up like, well, what's the best logic I can think up in this moment to deny that I have to do these steps, or deny that manifestation is real, or deny that manifestation could work for me. We're really going to break down that misinterpretation and interpret it correctly. When we say the 3D isn't real, I'm going to give a different way of saying that because I realize that statement in and of itself of any manifestation coach or just person online saying the 3D isn't real, that will immediately cause a misinterpretation. So let's get into this. First of all, my name is Genevieve. If you don't know me yet, if you're new to this channel, if you don't know what's going on here, I'm a manifestation coach and I'm here to help you manifest effectively, but also psychologically healthfully. Because honestly, those two should always be aligned. You kind of can't, although people will say that's a limiting belief, but technically you can't sustainably manifest if you're attempting it in a way that's psychologically unhealthy for you. And why would you want to do that anyway? It's not fun for you. You would be suffering. You wouldn't be enjoying reality very much, or yourself, your physical life very much, if you're manifesting but also psychologically unwell. Anyway, so we get deep into stuff here, and there are lots of ways that you can work with me if you like me in my style of coaching. I do private coaching. I have courses that are available down in the description, but I will say the day that I'm posting this, I actually don't know exactly which day I'm posting it. It's someday in November, but I am happy to announce that I believe it's going to be November 18th. Yes, I'm looking at my calendar. November 18th, I am going to have my once a year Black Friday sale on my courses. So I'm announcing it now so that if you are planning to buy a course, if you've always wanted to buy a course, I would wait until November 18th to buy that course. The course sale is going to be open for 10 days. I believe it's going to go, again, looking at my calendar, November 18th until November 28th. And that is, November 28th is Black Friday. So the end of the day, Eastern time, America, it will be the end of the sale. All courses will be 30% off. You could get every single course and you would get 30% off each course. So that's a pretty good deal. There will not be any sale on coaching sessions just because I'm already so booked out. And if I did a sale on coaching sessions, then that would make me even more booked out. So the 30% off is just going to apply to the courses, and I will post more details about that as we get closer to November 18th. So just keep that in mind if you want to buy a course. Okay, let's get into this. So when it comes to the world of manifestation as it currently exists online, a lot of our current culture uses Neville Goddard speak when explaining manifestation. He is such an interesting guy that even in death, he has manifested himself to be the leading manifestation teacher, to the point that now everyone follows him, people copy his language, people are even making AI speeches of his. That's something to be aware of. Look out for that. There's people posting Neville Goddard lectures, but it's actually completely AI. But anyway, I'm bringing this up because part of the Neville Goddard language that he used to use back in the 50s and 60s when he was actively teaching, because back then was a really different time, people spoke differently, a lot of his sentences, a lot of the catchphrases that he used that we still parrot today, a lot of those phrases are not as intuitive to us because they're said in a language that sounds almost kind of old-timey and romantic and like, what does that even mean? But that's just the way Neville Goddard spoke. So I'm saying this because the specific phrase, Neville Goddard phrase that is taken from his teachings that I think is confusing people, getting too much in their heads about, is that phrase that imagination creates reality. Or really, he would say that in a lot of different ways, but it would always come back to your imagination creates reality. All reality exists in your imagination. I think specifically the word imagination is not landing well on today's current culture, because the word imagination implies make-believe. It implies we're just living in fantasy in our heads. It's not really real. For a lot of us, the word imagination feels very detached from physical, real reality. It feels like those two aren't really talking to each other. So I'm going to be bold and revise the Neville Goddard statement that your imagination creates reality and change it to a more modern, direct way of interpreting exactly what he's saying. And that is that your perception creates reality. And I know you've heard me say that before. I'm sure you've heard other people say that before. And the reason this is an important change to make, changing the word imagination to perception, is because the word perception is literally interacting with the physical 3D reality. Because here's the bottom line. The physical 3D reality is real. It is a physically materialized real thing. Like this pen that I'm holding, it is physical matter that has materialized. It is real in that sense. But what is not real is any sort of perceived meaning of it. So to get to the bottom line here, it's not that the 3D reality isn't real, even though I'm still putting real in quotations, and I'll explain that later. It's not that the 3D reality isn't real or that it doesn't matter, so therefore manifesting doesn't matter. What we are trying to say in manifestation world is that your perception of the physical reality is what's real or not real. It is not, oh, the 3D is not real, this pen's not real, this pen doesn't matter, it's not real. Nobody is saying that. This pen is physical, real, material. It's really here. It really is a pen. Of course, that's just my perception that right now it's a pen. I could change my perception of this pen and say that this pen is actually my magic wand. And whenever I touch this pen, I'm amplifying my manifestations times 10. Do you see what I mean? I could decide that this once benign object that was just a pen on my desk that I didn't care about, I could decide to totally change my perception of it and make it into something meaningful about my life or a tool in my life that I use differently. Neville Goddard would say, oh, that was Genevieve using her imagination to create reality. Well, I would say I changed my perception of what this pen represents to me. I gave this pen a new meaning. I gave myself a new relationship to this pen. This pen is a new relationship to me. The physical reality is real. It is really here. You are really here. You are this weird, interesting soul manifested into this physical flesh. That is a real experience that you are having. And all this physical stuff you are looking at, the physical phone or computer or whatever you're watching me on right now, that is real. Nobody's saying that that's not real. What every manifestation coach, I hope, is getting across to you or is trying to, is that your perceptions create reality. It's not the physical stuff themselves that really matter that much. Like this pen only matters as much as I decide that it matters. This pen only matters as much as the role that I give it. Because what if I gave this pen now like a really negative meaning in my life, that this pen's actually a really bad omen, that whenever I see this pen, that means something really negative is going to happen to me that day. In my operant power, I could do that. I could give this pen any meaning I want. I could give it a really amazing meaning that whenever I touch it or whenever I see it, it means something, or I could give it a crazy negative meaning. But again, this is still a physical, it is what it is. It's just a pen. That's the best way I can describe it in its raw physical terms. But I decide, as the operant power, the way that I interact with the pen, the way that I perceive the pen. So you, if you are watching this and you have been someone, or if you've been someone that's afraid of the commentators that say stuff, well, manifesting doesn't matter, if the 3D's not real, if it doesn't matter, if only my imagination's real. I hope you're realizing what I meant when I said that was a really big misinterpretation of what we're doing here. We are acknowledging that yes, this is a pen. Your SP, your specific person, that's a real person. They're a physical, real flesh and blood person out there. But you're not changing them. You're not changing the 3D. And this is what we mean by the 3D doesn't matter or the 3D isn't real. But again, I really don't want to say that anymore, because it's not that the 3D isn't real. It's that your perception of the 3D isn't real. To you, it's real. Whatever you perceive is completely subjective to you, and whatever you perceive becomes real. But I'm emphasizing the word subjective, meaning that you can change the meaning. You can change the meaning depending on what you decide. Oh, actually, I'm going to take in this bit of evidence, or actually, I'm just going to decide that this is what's true. Or you don't even need any evidence. That's the whole point of manifesting, is you don't need any evidence at all to just decide, like I did with this pen. I've decided this pen is my magic wand, and whenever I touch this pen, that means that all of my manifestations are amplified by 10. And because I, the operant power, really believe that, or really perceive that, is like, yep, that's real. Whenever I hold this and I do that, that's real. That's real magic. Then it creates real magic. This is what's so weird and cool about us humans with this crazy creative human consciousness we have. So it's not that the 3D physical reality doesn't matter at all and you should just give up on life and just only live in your just only dissociate and live in your imagination because the 3D doesn't matter at all. We're not saying that. We're saying that the 3D does matter in the ways that you make it matter, in the ways that you perceive it. If you are perceiving the 3D as your enemy that you've been trying to manifest for years, that you're just so lonely and you can't do it and you can't figure it and nothing ever happens to you, and you are that person and that's the way you perceive reality, then yeah, that's real for you. That's what you're you're in that. That's your real reality. Real again, because it's subjective just to you. But if that's your story and you're sticking to it, then that's your story and you're sticking to it. But when you get into manifesting, you start seeing, whoa, I could pick a completely different perception of my entire life. Like every person in my life, every situation in my life, and all aspects of me, I could simply see it really differently, all of it. And here's another quick example I want to bring up. And this has actually been a question someone, I don't remember who, but someone keeps asking on every video I post, basically asking the same question about something about like, how do highly sensitive people manifest? And this is a great question to actually answer in this video, because my first answer to this question is, why are you identifying so much with being a highly sensitive person? And I know your first response to that is probably like clutch your pearls, because you're like, well, that's really real to me. That's been my whole life experience. I'm a highly sensitive, I'm very sensitive. I'm very emotional. I'm very sensitive. I'm intuitive. Like you have a whole really deep persona, really deep identity around that. But the reason I'm asking you first, like, well, why do you think being a highly sensitive person would give you like special rules to manifest? Or why are you even identifying as a highly sensitive person at all? Is because that is an identity that you have focused on. Maybe you had a childhood where you experienced emotional neglect, and therefore that conditioned you to be more sensitive to your own emotions because you were conditioned to not be taken care of in your emotions. So then you became more freaked out by your emotions, and then you grew up more, and then you studied all this stuff about empaths and narcissists, and then you grew up some more and learned about highly sensitive people. What I'm saying is, like, your conditioning made you develop an identity, a persona that you really hold to yourself. That's like, I'm a highly sensitive person. That's your deep identity perception. But you could, just for funsies, decide, okay, I actually don't need to be a highly sensitive person. I get that I formed that persona and that identity based off of childhood conditioning, a lot of study that I went into because I was trying to heal my childhood conditioning. But now that I understand manifestation, I could just decide for the next week, let's make it very experimental. And let's say for the next week, I'm just gonna, in a very lighthearted way, decide that I'm a really just easygoing, non-reactive person. And let's say I'm just gonna affirm that I've always been just super easygoing, non-reactive, just like a really not that emotional person in a good way. Like just really stable emotionally, not very reactive, just like super chill. Like just decide, I'm gonna try on a new costume, because that's what Neville Goddard talked about, putting on a new pair of clothes, try on a new costume. Step into a different character, be a different version of yourself, and have fun with it. That's why I'm saying be kind of lighthearted about it. Don't be doing it in this like, oh my God, I've got to fix myself. It's so messed up that I'm a highly sensitive person. I've got to fix it. We're not doing that. We're not in fix it mode as manifestors, because that's still us reacting to and therefore living in the old identity. Instead, we're just being curious and lighthearted and experimental and just being like, well, I wonder what would happen if I just decided for the next week, I'm just gonna spend 5 minutes a day thinking to myself, I'm a really emotionally stable, non-reactive person. I've always been a really emotionally stable, non-reactive person. I've always been not very sensitive when it comes to emotions. I've always been not very sensitive when it comes to other people's energy. These are the things you could just be trying, like, I'm gonna be that character. And you might notice that just in changing your identification, changing your perception, that is when maybe the 3D does some different stuff, or maybe you manifest yourself to genuinely become non-reactive to things. But again, this is what we mean by the 3D doesn't matter. And it's not that the 3D isn't real. It is physical matter. It's physically real in that it has materialized. But I'm saying the real in quotes because just because something is physical doesn't mean it's real. Like, we almost need a different definition of the word real. I guess when I say something is real in 3D, all I'm saying is that it's physicalized. It's a physicalized thing. But what makes it real, the quotes, what makes it real is, again, conscious perception of it. It's that conscious looking and making meaning and deciding and evaluating and deciding your reaction. That's what makes the 3D real. Your conscious evaluation, reaction, perception of it. And this is why manifestation is important, and that you can't just decide, screw manifesting, it doesn't work, the 3D doesn't matter anyway, whatever. Because really all manifestation is your perception of yourself. And you're going to spend your entire life is nothing but just your perceptions. I've said this before, I'll say that again. Your whole life from birth to death is just you experiencing yourself. That's your entire life. It's just you experiencing yourself. All of this stuff out here is real, again, physical stimuli that's bouncing off of you, that you're creating with, but you're only creating with your own perception. That's all you have access to is your own perception. Neville Goddard would say imagination. He'd say all you have access to is your own imagination, although he probably wouldn't say it like that. But like I said, I feel like that word imagination has tripped people up, where it feels too dissociative from the 3D. It feels too out there. It feels like it's a totally separate reality from the 3D. But what I'm saying is imagination is simply perception. And like I said in my last video right before this, it's about your genuine perception, training your genuine reactions, your genuine perception to things. And even if you quit manifesting, you would never be able to quit perceiving. Because again, that's all your human life is just you perceiving stuff, making meaning of it, making meaning of yourself. That's all your life is, you experiencing that meaning that you've stepped into for yourself. So you might as well have fun with it and create some identities and create some meanings that are just like, screw it, I'm gonna decide this now. This is what I am now. Use your free will to decide really cool stuff for yourself. Okay, this video turned into such a rant. I thought this was gonna be such a short video. It turned into so much ranting. So I'm gonna end this here. Please let me know your thoughts and comments down in the comments below. I'll also quickly say the group coaching that's gonna be in person, women's group coaching in Colorado, the application's still open for that, so just a reminder, check that out if you want to be a part of that. It's all down in the description below, so check it out, and I will see you guys in my next video. All right, bye.